All right, once more, thank you for joining today. We would like to get started with the webinar about the opportunities in the solar energy market in Bangladesh. So for today, we have allocated 90 minutes and I briefly would like to go through the agenda with you. So first of all, I would like to introduce you to the speakers of today and shortly introducing also why this study has been conducted. Following, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Zahedul, who will provide some further insights about the solar energy market in Bangladesh. I will present a brief background about the Dutch landscape in the solar industry. And then we have two guest speakers from Bangladesh who will provide their perspective on both the private sector as well as the public sector developments. And then we would like to allocate 10-15 minutes for Q&A. As mentioned already, kindly ask you to put yourself on mute. And if you would have any questions, you can put them in the chat box. We will address these during the Q&A session. Thank you. So first of all, our speakers today. I would like to give the floor directly after to my colleague Blaauw, who is the first secretary of the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Dhaka. He will shortly explain a bit about the background of this study and also the perspective from the embassy on the Dutch market and also the opportunities for Dutch companies in Bangladesh. Then my colleague Zahedul will provide an overview of the solar energy sector in Bangladesh. And then I will shortly explain a bit about the Dutch market. Then we have two speakers, as already mentioned. We are very keen to welcome Mr. Munawar Misbah Moin, who is the managing director of Rahimafrooz Renewable Energy. He will provide some details on his views on the private sector. And we're also very glad that Mr. Fazlul Hoque, Deputy Secretary of the Sustainable Renewable Energy Development Authority, SREDA in Bangladesh, is joining us today. He will share some further views on developments and policies in Bangladesh on renewable energies. So, first of all, Mr. Blaauw, I would like to give the floor to you on behalf of the Dutch Embassy in Dhaka. Bas, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and good morning to the Dutch participants and good afternoon to those in Bangladesh. First of all, thanks to Larive and LightCastle for doing this study that we're discussing today. We are very happy with the results so far, and I'm very much looking forward to what we can discuss. I'm excited to see, in particular, of course, Matthias and Zahedul, who've been working very hard at getting this done with their teams, and also excited to meet virtually the other distinguished speakers that we hear from today, Mr. Munawar Misbah Moin and Mr. Fazlul Hoque. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bas Blaauw. I'm the first secretary for Economic Affairs and Private Sector Development in Bangladesh. For us, this study has been a relatively long time in the making, in the sense that we have an aid to trade transition that's been ongoing for years now. Very often we base ourselves on the experiences that we have in Bangladesh. So we look at the sectors where we've traditionally been active, and that was mostly development cooperation. So agriculture, water, the garment sector. And I think since a year or two, three, we've been looking actively into sectors that are a little bit less familiar to us. And we will increasingly do so in the years to come. That is something that we were driving as an embassy for the last years, but last summer, our government also adopted a new policy for foreign trade and development cooperation. And Bangladesh in that strategy was designated a combination country. And for me, that really reflected some of the progress that we've seen in Bangladesh over the past years, working up to the LDC graduation. Bangladesh is now no longer in the group with the lowest countries that only receive development cooperation from the Netherlands, but really a country in transition with a formal status, with access to new instruments, new possibilities, and new examples such as Colombia, Vietnam, South Africa to compare itself with. Of course, when we start to implement such a policy or start thinking about what we can do, we are always very much affected by the local context. And in the last fall, of course, we saw as a consequence of among other things, the aftermath of COVID and the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine, an energy crisis that affected most societies in the world. And in Bangladesh, we saw that very clearly, not only on the consumer level, of course, but an energy crisis affects companies, affects the private sector, affects everything. So we started thinking about what we can do to at least start understanding what the problems are, where the solutions may lie, and also increasingly how we can not think in only development projects, but more in seeing if we can inform our own private sector, see what the Dutch comparative advantage can be. And I think for solar energy, it's a very sort of gut feeling topic where people tend to say, okay, we can never compete with the manufacturing in other countries in the region. And that might be true, but of course, and I hope we can discuss that today as well. I know we will. Is where the Netherlands does have added advantage, and that is in the integrated solutions, applying solar in particular ways that I think is innovative and that I think is cost effective too. And for us as an embassy, we will look closely at the appetite in the Dutch and Bangladeshi private sector. Traditionally, we are a matchmaking platform. We want to connect you to those parties that can help you do business. If you don't need us, that's also fine, of course, but we intend to support this appetite and this interest. The support can be direct, so we could, with the right conditions, we can help design a project, help companies with troubleshooting when they face issues, but we will also look into how we can support indirectly and more strategically. So how can we engage with in a dialogue with the most important stakeholders to help Dutch companies understand the legal, the regulatory frameworks, and some of the challenges and opportunities that they might be able to find in Bangladesh. So feel free to reach out to us either in the chat or in the discussion today, or also after the webinar bilaterally with your questions to enter the Bangladeshi market. And we will do our best to help you connect to our network. I'm very much looking forward to today's discussion, and I'll be here for the duration of the webinar for any questions that participants may have. So with that, I'll pass the mic back to Matthias. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Bas, and thank you for sharing your perspective. So maybe to add for those joining us this morning, this study indeed originates from the fact that Bangladesh is a fast-growing emerging market, but highly dependent on fossil fuels till date. And there lies both an opportunity, but also I would say a main challenge to how to become more sustainable. And the Netherlands having a strong solar and renewable energy industry, I would say could contribute also to this energy transition. So that is also one of the reasons that the embassy engaged Larive and LightCastle to conduct the study. Shortly on the background of Larive and LightCastle, Larive International, we are a Netherlands headquartered business development advisory firm, which is supporting companies with entering, expanding in high growth markets in Asia, Central Eastern Europe, and Sub-Saharan Africa, for which we have established a network of affiliated firms in 24 countries at current, including Bangladesh, where we are represented by LightCastle Partners, which is represented today by Zahedul, one of the directors of the company. And this study has been conducted in the last quarter of last year, starting in November. We completed in February. I do believe, Bas, that it's also the ambition of the embassy to distribute the results of this study via your channels. So once formally completed, this will also be publicly published. Is that correct, Bas?
Certainly, yes.
Excellent, excellent. All right, let's get started. So as mentioned, we would like to share our observations on the current situation in the Bangladeshi market and where lie the opportunities and how the Dutch could tap into that. I will take on the latter parts. So as such, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Zahedul.
Thank you, Matthias. Good morning to everyone from the Netherlands and good afternoon to our friends from Bangladesh. We will try to keep our presentation very brief and we'll only be focusing on the key points. While conducting this study, we actually approached qualitative methodology. We interviewed value chain actors across the different value chains, starting from the importers, EPCs, regulators, and financial institutions, and others. And we have tried to summarize our key findings from those discussions and interviews, and also based on the secondary research that we had conducted. If you move on to the next slide. So as we know, Bangladesh has done quite well over the last 10 years. Our growth trajectory this year, overall average growth has been above 6%. However, the COVID scenario and the Ukraine-Russia war has created certain challenges for the economy. We are facing some structural challenges. However, our GDP growth has remained at a positive trajectory, which is quite unique in the region. And as we have seen with the rising economic growth, or the growth in our economy, we have seen that our electricity production and consumption have also increased significantly. If you have a look at the overall production capacity, you'll see that there has been an increase of 204% in our installed capacity, which has happened over the last 10 years. However, due to certain challenges, our demand has not increased in tandem. We're in a positive, we're in a good shape, because we have significant excess capacity of electricity. And as we know, the economy is expected to keep on growing according to multilateral development agencies like IMF and World Bank, which states that we would be growing at a significant pace in the coming years. And this would require us to consume this additional capacity of electricity. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So if you look at the mix, if you have a look at the mix of the sources for generating electricity, we'll find that natural gas happens to be one of our CCGT-based power plants, happen to be one of our mainstay in power generation. This is due to the fact that we historically dependent on our domestic sources for natural gas. However, due to lack of exploration of new gas fields, we and the government strategy of relying on LNG-based power sources, we had started importing or increasing our import of LNG. Currently, we roughly import around 25% of our gas demand. Apart from that, we also have certain dependence on HFO-based or diesel-based power plants as well. We also import a certain percentage from India as well through the wheeling facilities. Alongside there is 11% captive power which is being generated in different factories, particularly garments factories. If you look at the renewable sector, we will see that renewables account for less than 4% of our total generation mix, which is much lower than the government's target of attaining 10% generation within the year 2020. The government has direct plans of generating at least 30% of our energy within the year 2030 from renewable sources, and 40% of our total energy generation from renewable sources within the year 2040. In order for this to happen, there has to be significant investments coming from the private sector, because many of these IPPs, independent power plants, are financed by private sector investments and funding. If you can move on to the next slide, please. If you look at the renewable or the solar energy market, we'll see that it's evenly divided across the on-grid and the off-grid systems. As we know, there are significant generations happening in the solar home systems, which are independent units predominantly used in the rural areas. And others, there are on-grid systems, which are either power plants, solar parks, or these are captive facilities or rooftop-based solar facilities in the manufacturing sectors. As we know, there has been a recent shift in our policies in 2018, leading to net metering system, leading to better incentive mechanism for the manufacturers to install solar home-based systems. And as I have mentioned before, solar remains one of our mainstays. It accounts for roughly 75% of our current generation, and we believe that solar-based power generation will remain a mainstay for renewable sources. Apart from this growth, there are certain developments which will lead to further increase in rooftop-based solar generation. One thing would being the RMG sector's shift towards green certificate building green factories, which entails having renewable sources for generating electricity. Alongside, the government or the industry expects around 500 additional factories to become green factories within the year 2023, which is currently around 192. which are LED certified buildings. If you can move on to the next slide, please. If you look at the global picture, we all understand the existing challenges of relying on import of fossil fuel, just as you have seen due to rise of LNGs. This has led to globally, also within Bangladesh, a shift towards or a rethinking of what role solar or renewable energy can play in order to ensure our energy security in a way. And Bangladesh, being a signatory of multiple international treaties, is duty bound to reduce carbon footprint, carbon emission, which would definitely lead to more focus on renewable sources, including solar. In terms of our policy imperative, as I've mentioned earlier, the government has announced increase in renewable energy generation from 30 to 40% of our total energy generation within the year 2040, which is part of our Mujib sustainability plan, which got ratified recently. Alongside, the central bank has also set aside certain refinancing scheme, which is called green financing, to the tune of $3.68 billion, which would also facilitate investments in those areas. And export-oriented factories, which includes the ready-made garments factories, also get certain taxation benefits to the tune of 2% tax incentive for moving towards renewable sources. In terms of investments, as we have seen over the last 10 years, the private sector has played a significant role in making the funds available for these partnerships. Alongside, we have seen that the generation over power generation from solar parks have increased significantly, although there are scope for further improvement, but overall generation has increased to 261 megawatt in 2022 from 3 megawatt in 2017. And as I've mentioned before, RMG sectors and a few FMCG sectors are moving towards generating solar-based power in their factory premise. Next slide, please. If you look at the value chain for captive solar rooftops, so we will see that EPCs, as we know, play a dominant role in facilitating this transaction, starting from providing consultancy services to helping procure these equipments. There are two methodologies for operations. One is the OPEX method, and another is the CAPEX method. Through the OPEX method, the investor actually makes the investment and sells the generated electricity to the consumer, which includes the factories. And the factories or the manufacturing operations actually get it at a discount, usually to the tune of 20%. For the CAPEX model, the investment in this solar facilities or the solar PV system is made by the manufacturer, and they actually benefit from this in terms of lower electricity charges. And as we know, financing, we will be talking a bit more about financing in the subsequent slides. Financing plays a major role. One main challenge that these companies, these manufacturing operations face is the cap in the financing limit. We will be talking a bit more details in the subsequent slides, but this is one of the main challenges. Another challenge is the lack of understanding of green financing among the financial institutions, which are entrusted with the disbursement of funds. So there might be interventions opportunities on scope for increasing the capacity of these bankers who are mainly entrusted with this disbursement, or for deploying these funds for the shift in renewables. Next slide, please. If you look at the IPPs, there are a number of power plants or solar parks which are in the pipeline. A couple of them have been launched. As I have mentioned, the growth in terms of proliferation and growth of solar parks have been quite slow, particularly due to a few reasons. One issue is definitely the lack of available lands. As we know, we need lands which are non-agricultural in nature. Procurement of the land is considered to be a major problem while setting up these solar parks. Apart from that, there are certain challenges which entails the streamlining of the PPA agreement. Although there has been a lot of instances where the private sector has been working with the public sector, but there are certain areas where the PPA agreement can be streamlined, particularly for renewable-based solar parks. As I've mentioned, EPCs play a major role in facilitating these turnkey projects. And they not only offer consulting support and equipment transfer, but also help with access to financing as well, because they also help connect these IPPs with debt financing as well, if required. And we feel that there are medium-term prospects. This is particularly due to the fact that there is a distinct lack of available lands for setting up these solar parks. If you have a look at the solar home system segment, this is predominantly applicable for the rural segment. This previously used to be one of the mechanisms for providing electricity for the off-grid areas. However, due to higher penetration, the electricity penetration rate is around 98 to 99%, which means that there is lesser demand for solar home systems, off-grid solar home systems. However, due to large scale absence of electricity connection or load shedding in the rural areas to the tune of 2 to 3 hours, solar home systems can be a good backup electricity power source for the rural areas. If you can move on to the next slide, please. If you have a look at the policy parameters, based on the policies that have been enacted by the government, we have a renewable energy policy which has been enacted in 2008, net metering policy which had been enacted in 2018. We understand that the government is quite keen to promote renewable energy due to a few reasons. One part is our commitment to move away from fossil fuel, usage of fossil fuel. Another is to ensure stability, because we are having to depend increasingly on imported fossil fuel, which increasingly will become a huge problem due to geopolitical issues and also due to the fact that we as a country are facing foreign currency issues. So it's imperative that we move towards renewable sources, which will reduce our import requirements as well. As we have seen, IPPs are going to become more important, but rooftop-based solar will also become a very, very important part of our renewable energy journey. Apart from lands, a few other areas have been identified, which includes canals, lakes, and other water bodies which can be used as a surface for developing the solar parks. These are being explored. Based on our discussion with SREDA, we came to understand that this is something that is being explored. However, it's still at the testing phase, and we are hoping that maybe in a couple of years, or maybe in the next 2 to 3 years, this will also become a viable means for facilitating this energy generation. As I've mentioned before, grid modernization is another area which needs to happen in the future, and the government is investing. Hopefully, we will be getting the return from that in the coming days. Next slide, please. If you look at the financing the picture, we'll see that roughly 2.3 billion euro has been disbursed in the April to June quarter 2022, and most of this had gone for refinancing solar or green factories, particularly garments factories, which also partially includes rooftop solar as well. According to the central bank directives, at least 5% of the loans have to be deployed for green loans. However, roughly 4% on average have been deployed. So the financial institutions have been unable to deploy that fund due to certain reasons. One being lack of capacity. In terms of the limit, the central bank has set aside euro 3.7 billion for financing green and sustainable projects. The biggest challenge will be to ensure deployment of this fund. The refinancing scheme incentivizes the commercial banks to deploy the fund at the rate of 5.5% interest rate, which is later refinanced by the central bank at 3%. In terms of the challenges, there are two major challenges. One part is for OPEX-based, CAPEX-based investments which are happening, particularly because there is no transaction happening, because the benefit that is accrued to the factory is in terms of lower cost of electricity bills. For OPEX-based investments, there is a transfer of payment which is going on between the investor and the factory, which can be better assessed by the financial institutions. ITCOL is there, which is a government-owned NBFI, which is quite hands-on in this investment, but there are scope for other commercial banks to get a grasp, a better understanding of the ecosystem and become more attuned to investing for rooftop solar. Next slide, please. Another major challenge that we came across based on our discussion from the FIs were the cap in terms of loan. the cap that is currently there is inadequate, or it can probably cover a power plant to the tune of 2 megawatt at the best. So there might be an opportunity to increase the lending cap on the part of the central bank, which would facilitate installation of rooftop solar plants. If we summarize the key challenges, we'll see that macroeconomic risk is a huge challenge in the context of Bangladesh, given the fact that importing of equipment is becoming a challenge. Since we have to depend on Chinese imported solar panels, import is becoming a huge challenge. Although a few companies have tried to set up, including one being Rahimafrooz, have tried to set up a solar-based solar panel plant. However, due to COVID and undue challenges from the Chinese competitors, they have been unable to continue operations. In terms of permit risk, as I've mentioned before, acquisition of land is a huge problem, particularly for solar parks, which needs to be streamlined, and government's direct support is required with the procurement process. And a low availability of land, as we know, the density of the country is very high. It's difficult to find non-agriculture land, so which is also a major problem. In terms of the market risk, we also find out that there are certain costs in terms of cost of installation and the existing subsidies that are being provided for fossil fuel like petrol and others are also one of the hindrances for promoting renewable energy in Bangladesh. In terms of political risk, the government is duty bound to support the renewable energy sector, and the policies and the efforts are in place to facilitate growth of renewable energy in Bangladesh. And in terms of the financial risk, just as I've mentioned, the central bank has a refinancing scheme, but the fund is probably not being deployed properly due to certain systemic challenges which needs to be addressed in order to streamline the process, which includes training the banks, commercial banks, which are deploying the fund, capacity development into that end, and also certain policy advocacy is required to increase the lending cap, which would enable growth of a higher capacity rooftop solar facility. So I'll stop there and hand over the floor to Matthias. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Zahed. Lots of information, and I already noted a few items which I think there will be an opportunity also for Dutch companies to interact, both in terms of trade as well as investments. For now, I would like to briefly tell you a bit about the Dutch landscape of parties active and stakeholders active in the solar energy sector. So shortly on the Dutch market, I would say during the past decade, the Netherlands really emerged as a leading player in terms of solar energy. And nowadays, we are the third largest country in the European Union in terms of installed PV capacity, which is behind Spain and Poland. I think this is a result of a number of drivers. First of all, it was the government, which was providing, amongst others, a number of subsidies, allowing both consumers as well as commercial parties to invest in solar capacity. But we also home to a number of strong research institutes, and the combination of the ecosystem between private sector, universities, and government stakeholders allowed the Netherlands to emerge as one of the leading players in terms of innovations, particularly in terms of high quality new innovations, combinations, where we could integrate PV solutions in other industries. So during the past decade, this industry has been developing rapidly, and also if we look to the next 5 years, an expected plus 10% growth of the industry is forecasted. Another figure, we also currently the second largest country in terms of capacity, just behind Australia, if I recall, in terms of per capita generated solar power. So if we look to the landscape, as already mentioned, in the Netherlands, it's an ecosystem by private sector parties, but also universities and governments closely interacting and allowing for developments in terms of high quality and high yielding energy efficiency solutions. As already mentioned by Bas, but also by Zahed, the Netherlands simply cannot compete with Asian suppliers of particularly panels, such as the Chinese, So that provided us a route towards more high quality and niche solutions. And if we look to the landscape and the needs and opportunities in Bangladesh, we also highlighted a few of those where we see that there could be an interaction between Dutch solutions and Bangladeshi parties. Particularly where we could combine also the financing needs. As I had already mentioned that at current there's a lack of understanding, particularly among banks, but there's also a lack of availability of land. Well, there we could identify niche solutions where the Dutch could really offer their advantages. Again, the Dutch being home to a number of private sector players, and we in our report we highlighted 5 niche solutions where we think the Dutch could really provide added value to Bangladesh in order to facilitate the energy transition. And those 5 are solutions where we have digital transformations combined with PV. But the Netherlands also being very strong in EV solutions. Well, I was in Bangladesh last week. I do not recall that I saw many EV vehicles at this moment, but it might be something for the years ahead. Where we do see a lot of opportunities is particularly in EV in combination with cold storage, particularly in remote off-grid regions. The Netherlands, having a substantial horticulture sector, has also developed various solutions where we have a combination of solar and the horticulture. And finally, we do think that there are interesting options for rooftop panels, particularly where the Dutch could bring in also their financing solutions. So we would like to elaborate a bit more on a few of those. We go to the next slide. So as I had already mentioned, the Bangladeshi government has also its policy to particularly also for private sector parties that they enforce some certain amount of rooftop PV. There are a number of parties already engaging in this, but we do think that particularly given the lack of land in Bangladesh, this could be an interesting option to further increase the PV generation in Bangladesh, and it does have a lot of experience in this field. Again, particularly if we could also combine this with financing solutions, we do think that there are interesting opportunities for Dutch parties. What we noticed during our research is that in order to compete, let's say, with Asian peers, we have to position ourselves, particularly in a combination of course, integrated solutions, but also technical assistance, preferably providing also the financing. And this would really give a competitive advantage towards Asian peers. So that is one of the angles we think we would like to highlight also for the Dutch government for future engagements. The second one is in terms of cold storage. So Bangladesh has quite extensive grid connections nowadays, but there's still off-grid regions where there are energy needs. For example, in agri-food processing, but you could also think about more critical processes such as pharmaceuticals and medical, where there are off-grid locations which could be fueled by solar solutions. In this case, also replacing for a large extent the power generated by diesel generators, which is nowadays by the increased price of fuel is also skyrocketing the price of these generators and the OPEX costs. So particularly for the industrial segment, we do think that the Dutch could there provide integrated solutions for example, food processing, pharmaceutical or medical industries. So these are 2 examples where we would say that the Dutch could really position themselves as unique service suppliers for Bangladeshi stakeholders. If we go to the next slide. There we go. Yeah, we would really like to give the floor to our 2 guest speakers. So we are glad that we have two leading speakers from the Bangladeshi market amongst us this morning. And I firstly would like to give the floor to Munawar Misbah Moin, who is the Managing Director of Rahimafrooz Renewable Energy. And Mr. Munawar would like to share some views, particularly with respect to the private sector developments and opportunities, and also where the Dutch could interact and increasingly become partners for Bangladeshi stakeholders, both in terms of trade as investments. So, Mr. Munawar, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Thanks to the Dutch Embassy and LightCastle for the invitation. I think the report and the assessment is very much spot on, and where the shifts and possible opportunities are in terms of solar. So as you can see that almost till 20, if you look at the trend between the off-grid and the on-grid, till 2015, Bangladesh was a significantly off-grid market. And then slowly it started, with LEED certification and all that towards on-grid systems. And then net metering sort of started spiraling the on-grid demands. So the market has moved from watt peak to kilowatts and megawatts. That's the whole transition over the last 5-7 years. So what we are seeing and what we'll continue to see, at least in the next 3 to 5 years, is this significant adaptation of solar, especially for rooftop, because of the net metering advantage, whether you call it CAPEX or OPEX. Of course, it is more CAPEX today and less OPEX, because I think the OPEX is a matter of getting the right investors and financiers in. So there are few companies, but I think such sort of investors and financiers are still not ready locally, and very few are coming from abroad. And that is one area where perhaps Dutch investors can, look into it to sort of, come in, take the early movers advantage, and then, scale it up. So rooftop definitely at the moment is key. Is the growth sector, and the Bangladesh Bank Green Transformation Fund is a good one. The one which they sort of revised and updated from December, I believe, 22 onwards. But the banks are yet to catch up and figure out, because I think the problem is this whole mindset of having to have security all the time, And what we are trying to encourage the banks is to focus on project financing, If the project by itself is feasible, it can generate the additional savings of the cash flow that itself should, and our numbers show that it should be feasible to finance. I think it's a matter of time, maybe the next 5, 6, 9 months, we shall start seeing some traction. Because from a debt financing point of view, it really does not make sense to bring in dollars, at least for rooftop. It does not, because the savings are all in mostly in Dhaka. Perhaps it only makes sense for the garments industry per se, because they have dollar revenue. Other for all the other local industry, Dhaka debt financing makes much more sense. IPPs, yes, that's another big area, but not the most fast-moving one. The land acquisition is definitely an issue, and the IPP process, I think that needs a bit more consolidation and fine-tuning, so that it does not take the usual time that it has been taking so far. So there is a significant need to make the process much more plug and play for investors to actually jump into it. So we still have concerns at the IPP level in terms of scaling it up, but some has to be done. Few gigawatts of solar parks has to happen because everything cannot happen with the rooftops. The other key area which has been appropriately highlighted in the presentation is actually the productive use of renewable energy and the distributed renewable energy, you know, whether it is for cold storage, whether it is for, EV mobility through charging, it could be milk chillers, irrigation pumps is another, another one, and so on. So the whole innovation comes in with renewable energy is whoever can come up with a solution that can directly link the use of renewable energy to productive use. And rural Bangladesh is the prime market for that, because the whole idea is to focus at agriculture, livestock, fisheries, all the sectors which are viable in rural Bangladesh, and figure out, what are the solar-based productive solutions that can actually significantly add value. And of course, along with technology, the right type of financing for that has to happen. And from our past experience, whether you look at, irrigation pumps or even home systems, 15, 18 years back, people didn't believe in home systems. People didn't believe in irrigation pumps. So initial demonstration is very, very key. Initial demonstration is extremely key for people to believe. The good thing about rural Bangladesh is that I think compared to urban side of the country, is that rural people understand solar really, really works. They have seen it in their homes. They have seen it in the irrigation pumps, right? So they know it actually works. And one of the biggest area where we think solar will come is actually in the three-wheel electric vehicle charging population, because it's massive. It consumes almost over 2 gigawatts of electricity daily. So we believe that it will start with solar hybrid charging stations and then eventually move into a much larger possibility. And again, that gets connected to energy storage through batteries, right? So you will have battery lease, battery swapping with connected apps. So all those possibilities are significant. And rural Bangladesh is a prime, a place to see this sort of, explode. So it's the initial, first movers who has to go in and really demonstrate and come. So few people are doing it. As a company, we are also piloting some of these things and see where it goes. But we believe that productive use, including charging, cold storage, milk chillers, and so on, has significant opportunity. And that's where I suppose technologies where the Dutch companies perhaps can come in. And financing, of course, will continue to remain a challenge each time a solution will get introduced. As usual, it takes some time for people to really sink in, understand. Some will happen faster. In case of electric charging and all that, I think it will happen faster. But cold storage, milk chiller, irrigation, all that perhaps will take a little bit time, but it will definitely happen. Policy level, a lot of work taking place. I know the member of the SREDA is here. But I believe what we are seeing from the private sector is more concrete roadmap in terms of targets, specific targets, not only about just saying gigawatts. We need to be able to be very specific, on the grid, distributed, productive use, budgets, timeline. So that's what we are seeing from the private sector, that we need more interventions in that aspect. So that would be my sort of input so far for the session.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Munawar. I noted down a number of elements you mentioned as opportunities to move forward the industry in Bangladesh. We'll come back to you later on. We have also a number of questions received via the chat. I also urge everyone to put in your questions via chat function, and we will have some time at the end of this presentation also to address these. Thank you, Mr. Munawar. I would like to go over to our next speaker. So I would like to give the floor to Mr. Fazlul Hoque, who is the Director at the Sustainable Renewable Energy Development Authority of Bangladesh. And he would share some views with respect to the upcoming policy developments and legislation in the country. So Mr. Hoque, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, person Blaauw from First Secretariat Embassy of Kingdom of the Netherlands, Dhaka. Again, Director Larive International, Matthias, Brienen, and Zahedul, Amin, Director LightCastle Partners, and finally Munawar, Misbah, Moin, Managing Director of Rahimafrooz Renewable Energy. You have a very good presentation on Bangladesh perspective and also for DAS perspective regarding renewable energy, specifically for solar area. Regarding policy and legislation perspective, I can give you some impression. For solar and wind, if we, Bangladesh perspective, contribution of solar at this moment, renewable energy is nearly more than 75. And wind, hydro, and others, you have seen already from the first presentation from Zahedul, Amin, you got that information. Renewable energy policy at first formulated in 2008. After 15 years later, we have initiated to reformulate, not reformulate, just formulated a new policy, that is renewable policy of Bangladesh, that will be 2013. It is in under processing. First stakeholder meeting, second stakeholder meeting, and also workshop is already done. And now this policy will, within a few days, will be sent to the interministerial meeting. Hopefully within this financial year, I mean 30th June, it will be passed by your parliament. Yeah, I agree with some issues of Munawar, Misbah, Moin. Very good point regarding productive use of RE and distributed use of RE, budgeting, more intervention and strategic and specific actions. Yes, definitely all those are very crucial things, not only for policy implication. Yes, we have target, we have target 30% for 2030 and also 40 by 2041, according to the government commitment. But this renewable policy will specify some specific issue. If we just mention some things regarding renewable energy policy, earlier 2008 renewable policy focused only 7 important things. I mean, that is, if we exclude objectives, that means 5 or 6 important things. But now renewable policy will encompasses almost 18 specific area. Including there are almost 13-12 new area will cover. It is licensing, investment, carbon trading, research and development, capacity build-up, quality assurance, all things, financing, all these things are included here. Hopefully, when it is placed on the interministerial meeting, then it will be more concise, and that it will be helpful for Bangladeshi and also other foreign investors regarding renewable energy policy. And another important policy which will strive for net metering for rooftop solar. In Bangladesh, there are so many projections, so many research on rooftop solar or potentiality of solar. One important thing is needed for potential of wind and potential of solar mapping. Potential of wind, it is in under processing in our country. We submitted to the power division. Now we got some information. It will be updated because SREDA, Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority, is a regulatory agency and a nodal agency. That is why our task is to formulate policy and also regulatory monitoring and also regulatory activities. We are doing all those activities with the streamline of the government policies. That is as an important organization, specifically for Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority. For example, solar, if we consider solar, then we'll come to the wind specifically. We see that Bangladesh is a very good location, 20 degree 34 minute and 26 to 38 north latitude and 88 degree 1 minute to 92.40 east longitude. So Bangladesh is a semi-tropical country. 70% of the sunlight is available throughout the year. So 4 to 6 hours sun, use PV technology, receives average solar radiation per kilowatt hour meter square per day, it is 4.5. So it is very good for renewable energy, specifically for solar. And there are lots of opportunities, public building, railways, street, and also private sector building, RMG. There are lots of open spaces also there. So we can promote our renewable energy through net metering. No project is not risk-free. Every project success of every project or every work is depends on how we can handle with the risk. So financial, definitely, I also agree with Zahedul, Amin, also Munawar, Misbah. For Bangladesh case, financing is a very crucial issue for Bangladesh. But from Bangladesh perspective, Bangladesh government has taken some very good initiative. In 2020, the sustainable green green policy, Bangladesh Bank has instituted Green Products Initiative and also Green Transformation Fund, Technological Development Fund. 39 commercial banks and 25 financial institutions, they have signed with the Bangladesh Bank Sustainable Development Department, that is Bangladesh Bank, to channel out those money for the customer, for the investors, industrialists, because these are crucial things. Besides this, it called Infrastructure Development Company and also BIFFL, Bangladesh Infrastructure Finance Limited. They also provide some loan to those who are interested. I mean, industrialists, consumers, or any other stakeholders, or any of our entrepreneurship, they can provide also loan. So international organizations, they also come with huge opportunity. If we recently see that we have Bangladesh up to 2022, if we consider 2016 to 22, 6.7 billion national and international sources of fund specifically for RE sector has come. We have to materialize all those issues. So people are very much eager to find out how can we solve this, because Bangladesh Bank has come, other commercial institutions, financial institution also come, scheduled bank is also come. So international organization, they has come. So I think that we can overcome some hurdle regarding financial issues. If we consider wind, potentiality of wind, maybe you have known about NRL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So many organization, institution, and also Bangladesh government, maybe Power Development Board and also other organizations, they also survey for wind, potential of wind. That is why SREDA is at present doing on onshore wind mapping, how to find out the potentiality of wind, because Bangladesh has huge potential regarding the NRL report. If we consider 5.75 to 6.75 average speed of Bangladesh coastal area, then according to their report, in wind, it is 30,000 megawatt potentiality of wind. Solar, there are some organizations, they also provide some other ambitious plan. That is why government is also framed a plan regarding wind and also solar. In this perspective, not only renewable energy policy will a new renewable energy policy is formulated. Net metering guideline is also reviewed with keen observation. We have communicated with other stakeholder utilities, so it will be updated in future, in near future. Not at this month, maybe in near future. We are working on that issues also, because Bangladesh has a fuel mix. If we consider 40% of our power capacity from the renewable energy by 2041, Bangladesh has a renewable energy sector. That means renewable energy capacity has to be upgraded. But another important thing is not only solar and wind, we have to integrate the energy efficiency and conservation plan with the solar, wind, or renewable energy plan. If these are integrated, then supply demand side, energy auditing side, energy efficiency side, energy conservation side, so all will come through and make a very good result for Bangladesh. I think regarding energy efficiency and conservation, there are SREDA has framed so many policies. That is a different thing. And regarding this renewable energy part, it will make, we are working now a renewable energy policy, and we are also working on solar energy roadmap for Bangladesh. That is, so it will give a very good opportunity, and it will open a very good window for the investors, industrialists, and also entrepreneur, those who are interested in renewable energy. Thank you. Thank you all. Hello.
Thank you, Mr. Hoque, for sharing your views, and we'll come back to later on you with further questions from the audience. Speaking about the audience, I would like to ask everyone also to share their questions via the chat function. Thank you. We already received a number of interesting questions, and I have one for for Blaauw. Mr. Hoque already expressed that the Bangladeshi government is working on new policies, which will also further pave the way for foreign investors. From your perspective, on a G2G level, what would be the position of the Dutch government in order to further facilitate the opportunities for, in this case, Dutch companies to further strengthen the position in Bangladesh in terms of trade and investments? Bas, thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I think there's multiple ways to go about it. On the one hand, as I also referenced in the beginning, we can, of course, look at and talk about the regulatory environment, but that's not something that we completely control. What we've done in other sectors that has worked quite well is to set up an activity, work with, for example, demonstrations, see if we can incentivize Dutch companies to take a couple of hurdles, work on improving the value chain in a particular area, and in that way see if we can familiarize them with the market. That's an iterative process, so that's also a process in which they will learn, they will see what's happening in the market and what's possible, and that will give us sort of the field that we need to also have this conversation ongoing with the government. I think in general in Bangladesh, and these policies have briefly been touched upon already, of course, everything's pointing in the right direction. There's a couple of incentives that are promising, and it's up to us to be sure that we have them clear, that we can communicate as effectively also for companies that are willing to enter the market outside of the scope of possible activities.
Excellent. Thank you, Bas. You mentioned that one of the opportunities is also to introduce Dutch technologies via establishing pilot projects. If I may ask to Mr. Munawar, you mentioned a couple of things which are relevant in order to boost the industry. If we might be in the position to establish a couple of pilot projects and demonstrations in Bangladesh by showcasing Dutch technologies innovations, could you maybe point out two of those which you would like to prioritize? So what would be which innovations would you like to introduce in Bangladesh, which might be fostering future development of the industry, Mr. Munawar?
Thanks, Matthias. I'll take from the presentation, I'll focus on two. One is the cold storage, and the other one would be the EV charging stations using some sort of battery lease on a connected app platform. So that these two would be very good innovative products and solutions and services to bring into this market, which has a mix of energy and direct productive use capability, and then of course the challenges of eventually financing, how it will get into play. Also, these two I would definitely recommend.
Excellent, thank you. Again, you mentioned financing, and this was also
so of course the financing challenge is, okay, when you tell, let's say you go to a bank, right, and they understand how to finance a diesel generator, but the moment you say solar cold storage, they got 200 things to they can't figure out. You tell them that I want to do battery lease, let's say a solid state battery or a lithium ion battery, right? And it's a energy generating product, right? And it can generate revenue by itself by leasing and charging. But then again, you understand a diesel or a petrol generator, but then you wouldn't understand a battery that stores the energy from solar and then delivers energy. And so these are the initial what do you call it, dichotomy or gap in understanding. And so how do you make such a revenue generating new technology productive asset financed, and how do you and monetize it and give them some sort of tracking system where they can really see it happen on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, those initial challenges, because it's something new way of doing it, typical of any new product and solution that when you introduce those questions that is there. So yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Munawar. You once more addressed the fact that the financial industry in Bangladesh should be, let's say, further strengthened in terms of technical understanding of the new innovations. It was also mentioned by Mr. Hoque that there recently have been many initiatives already by the Bangladeshi government in terms of strengthen the financial sector and provide incentives for further boosting investments. Of course, the Netherlands is home also to a strong financial industry, both banks, but also international finance institutes, such as FMO, which is very dominant also in Bangladesh. Mr. Hoque, if you look to the financial sector, what would you like to address to the Dutch? Where could we interact? Which activities should we deploy in Bangladesh also to strengthen the financial industry in Bangladesh? Thank you.
Sorry, please. Again, your question. I could not. My internet is interrupted here. I cannot clearly hear you. Please.
Okay.
Again.
Yeah, my question is, your government has recently, let's say, initiated various initiatives to further strengthen the financial capabilities for financing of renewable energies in Bangladesh, including a number of incentives. But what I hear from the various speakers, but it's also coming from the questions from the chat, is that there's still a gap in terms of what the financial services sector should offer in Bangladesh to further facilitate investments in solar energy. So given the fact that the Netherlands is home to a strong financial industry, both banks as well as international finance institutes, what would be your recommendation? How could we leverage the capabilities from the Dutch financial sector in Bangladesh? So what is needed to further strengthen the financial services sector in Bangladesh?
Okay, thank you. My point is, earlier I mentioned, maybe you recollect, all are recollect here, including Bangladesh Bank, 39 commercial bank and 25 financial institutions. They provide money. But one thing is that we have to work all together. We have to work and also have access how to channel out this money. SREDA last 28th February formed a committee just to accelerate or to promote how can easy access to this money. There are industrialists and also very I think entrepreneur in renewable energy, and also some commercial banks and also financial institutions. Many people do not know about the access of this money because its interest is low. Bangladesh Bank, earlier I mentioned 6 to 8 categories they provide loan nowadays. So it's a great opportunity for them. That is why at this moment, SREDA can take some information, because in SREDA, maybe you have known, National Solar Help Desk is here. We can get all kinds of information. Those who seek information, how solar rooftop or solar irrigation or any other information regarding solar, they can get from this National Solar Help Desk. Some financial information is also they have needed because of investment. In financial investment definitely is a very crucial thing. That is why we formed a committee, and to make it easy to the person, individual, industrialist, or anyone, so that money is there, interest is this much, these are conditions, so people can easily access that, and SREDA can play a supportive role in this regard here.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Munawar, you also would like to respond?
Yes, I think the multiple things, right? First is, how do we get our financial institutions to come out of this conventional mindset of having to take security for everything, but they want additional security beyond the project, and that's a stumbling block for this sort of project which generates its own efficiency and its own additional surplus fund, and over a period of time it makes it sustainable. So I think, how do you make the financial institutions comfortable with that financial model? Do we do some initial risk-taking insurance scheme or not? I don't know. So they have to get into this mindset of project financing and not capital financing with additional security and all that stuff. So that's number one. Number two, Dutch investors can definitely come into places like OPEX, OPEX model, lease model. They can come in and do the initial investment with a joint venture or local partner and things like that, and then slowly build a market where local debt financing can also eventually come in, and they can of course exit through IPOs, buybacks, and things like that. And number three would be sort of a startup pilot. The startups, investing in startups, right? The startups could be for all these last mile productive use solutions, whether it is electric vehicle charging or cold storage, milk chillers, whatever. So those sort of startup investments would actually make sense. Thank you.
Excellent, interesting. And Zahed, I also have a question for you, because Mr. Munawar mentioned also the startups industry in Bangladesh. I know that LightCastle, you're also pretty strong in the startup business. Could you share your thoughts a bit on? Do you see any developments in this sphere? Any networks which are relevant? Any new initiatives in order to fuel financing for startups? Zahed, floor is yours. I think Zahed is not able to answer the question now. Let me park the question for now and go over to the next one. So one more question I have also for Mr. Munawar. You mentioned, you pinpointed a few opportunities. I would like to ask you, do you have any insights in what are best practices in terms of solar fostering, further boosting the solar energy market from other countries in South or Southeast Asia? Do you see any countries say, well, that is really a leading market when we talk about PV, and this could be a model which we might also adapt in Bangladesh.
So of course, I think India is definitely a significant, if you look at the sort of way they escalated the whole renewable energy overall, but then also solar, and they have very distinct track from urban on-grid solutions to distributed rural solutions, productive use, social impacts and things like that. So definitely India is at a much larger scale, but still I think it is something that we can definitely relate to. So we need definitely that sort of focus, budgeting, attention, and so that's one example. And in terms of specific to IPPs, if you talk about grid connected, I think there is even much more countries. It could be even Malaysia, Thailand, India. They all have much more successfully executed IPP models than Bangladesh, and we have a lot of things to be able to adapt. Like for one simple example, one of the things that we have been proposing is, a tariff should not be negotiated. Tariff should be declared. Tariff should be declared, let's say, for a period of 6 months with certain requirements and criteria, and whoever meets that requirement and criteria and feels the tariff is feasible, bids and gets done with it. So that's one simple approach that we had talked about. Number two, we said that as government develops a lot of things, it should selectively develop solar parks, because buying lands, developing them, it's hugely time consuming, So if government takes the initiative of developing and having solar parks ready, like any industrial zones or anything like that, it could be like, 5 of them each with 100, 200 megawatt possibilities. So that also will significantly help. And on top of land, it even can be the water bodies, right? Depending what we heard at the beginning of the session. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So I see Zahed is still in our call and also raised his hand. Zahed, I mentioned that LightCastle, you have quite some expertise in the startup scene in Bangladesh, which is also mentioned by Mr. Munawar as one of the opportunities in the financial services sector to address. Could you perhaps highlight a bit on your perspective, how the startup scheme could also contribute to further boosting the solar energy industry in Bangladesh? Zahed.
Yeah, definitely, Matthias. I think just as Mr. Munawar has mentioned, there is significant potential for startups to invest in this segment. Unfortunately, we are still at a very nascent stage. I could only think of one startup which is doing very, very well, SoulShare. We also happened to interview them during the research process. So they are all working directly in the three-wheeler EV market space where they're offering renewable energy sources for these three-wheelers. So based on our understanding, we believe that we need to actually work on the system in order to encourage more young entrepreneurs to come to this segment, particularly given the fact that it's going to feature very heavily in our national strategy moving towards renewable energy. So while there are different accelerator programs going on across multiple areas, for example, for agri-tech and other areas, this might make sense for us to think of a separate incubation or accelerator programs, which would cater predominantly for renewable energy-based startups. So one part would be to increase the awareness level among young entrepreneurs so that they are more interested about investing in this area or foraying in this area. That would be one area. Second part would be to incubate them so that they are given the hand-holding support. And the third part would, of course, be access to impact funds and to some extent commercial venture capital funds as well, in order to test out some of these business models, which might also be relevant for these for our sustainable growth. Thank you, Matthias.
Excellent. Thank you, Zahed. And I see in the chat various questions also related to some technicalities, which I believe are also mostly addressed in our report. So this will come online shortly. It was mentioned also by the Netherlands Enterprise Agency that the report will be published on our website. So, for example, questions on taxation and tariffs, I think these will also be included in the report. So this will be published shortly. If we do not have any further remaining questions, then I would like to give the floor once more maybe to Bas Blaauw to do some closing remarks.
Thanks, Matthias. I was actually gonna make a remark still, but I'll combine it. No, I'm very happy to hear the discussion. Very excited also to hear about a lot of new sectors, new opportunities, new ways of approaching solar and the energy challenge in particular. But I also wanted to underline that of course we don't have to reinvent the wheel. In many ways, we have a lot of programs already in agriculture where we see potential for integrating some of the solutions that we haven't been able to design yet or to put in those activities yet. Of course, we're not the only ones. Other partners also work on these kinds of things. And I think for us, the biggest shift as the Netherlands is really starting to think about how can you put this on the market commercially, and what is our role in doing so. So I'm very grateful for all the ideas that we've heard today. Some of them, I think in particular, deserve some closer consideration. So I'm also happy to see this as a starting point of a dialogue that we'll have with you on the way forward. I think that the next step for us now is to make sure that the study is posted online, and that we can see how we can reflect a bit on this discussion and ways to follow it up concretely. I think seeing is believing. So seeing if we can get to some mode or another of demonstrating Dutch technology in Bangladesh, I think will be at the core of our thinking on the way forward. And with that, I think I wanted to thank you all for being here, for spending your time with us, and hope to continue the conversation very soon.
Excellent, Bas. And definitely, we would like to contribute also to introducing Dutch innovations in Bangladesh, for example, via pilots. A few things, and I don't want to repeat once more, but I think you pinpointed cold storage and agri-food, also by the other speakers, and also Mr. Munawar, you mentioned e-vehicles as a clear opportunity, particularly in remote areas. Furthermore, was addressed the needs, but also the opportunities to intervene in the financial services industry. That's where Dutch could also contribute, moreover in technical systems, but also introducing new financial models for OPEX and lease and the startup scene. Thank you all for joining us today. In case you would have any further questions, please reach out to us, either LightCastle or Larive, and we do envision that the report will be published at the website of Netherlands Enterprise Agency within the coming weeks. And we wish to remain also in contact with you in order to assess what kind of opportunity we could further materialize in the renewable energy industry in Bangladesh. Thank you all for your time today. On behalf of Larive and LightCastle, see you next time.